You've poured millions into crafting the perfect story about your company's AI capabilities. But what if I told you that the people who matter most, investors, partners, regulators, are looking right past all that marketing? What if they're seeing a completely different truth? Well, today, we're going to peel back the curtain and show you exactly how they're doing it. All right, before we dive in, we just have to get the official stuff out of the way. This is part 3 of a 10-part overview based on a comprehensive research report from Virtualization Options LLC, which is called How Investors, Regulators, and Business Partners Often Review an Organization's AI Initiatives. Now, as you can probably guess, we're only scratching the surface here. And of course, this isn't legal, financial, or investment advice, and it comes with no warranty of any kind. Okay, let's get to it. So here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about a huge shift I'm calling the transparency revolution. Then, we'll get into the intelligence stack, the actual tools stakeholders are using. After that, we'll decode what your public data is really saying about you. And finally, we'll look at a case study of what happens when reality, well, when it bites back. All right, first up, the transparency revolution. Look, the days when you could completely control your company's story with a few press releases and some slick PowerPoint decks, those days are long gone. We've shifted from an era of controlled marketing to one of, really, radical transparency. So I want you to just think about this for a second. What if the real, unvarnished truth about your AI projects, the wins, the struggles, all of it, what if it's already out there for anyone to see? Because for the sophisticated players, it is. They've stopped listening to the hype. They've started looking for the evidence. So how in the world are they finding this evidence? Well, that brings us to the intelligence stack. Think of it as a toolkit, a set of methods and resources that gives them a direct line of sight into what's actually happening inside your organization. And the engine driving this whole stack is something called OSINT. That stands for Open Source Intelligence. Now, the best way to think about this, and I love this metaphor, is to see OSINT as an organizational X-ray. It lets stakeholders look right through the skin, all the marketing and PR, and see the actual bones of your operation. So this stack has a few layers. The first is the hard data, the technical footprint. We're talking about deep dives into your public code on GitHub to see if your development is actually mature. They're scraping your job posts on LinkedIn to figure out what tech you really use and where you're desperate to hire, and you bet they're reading every line of your SEC filings and patent applications. This isn't speculation, it's forensics. But here's where it gets really interesting. The technical data is just one side of the coin. The other, and maybe even more powerful, layer is human intelligence. And the source of this intelligence? It's your own people. They're mining Glassdoor and Blind for those brutally honest, unfiltered reviews. They're tracking what your engineers are saying on social media. Your employees have become the ultimate source of ground truth. Okay, so now we know the tools they're using. Let's dig into what they're finding. It's time to decode your digital footprint and see the story that it's actually telling, whether you like it or not. A perfect example is your company's GitHub page. You might just see code, but an investor sees two different stories playing out at once. On the left, they see the technical stuff, code quality, testing, security. But on the right, they see something just as important, signals about your organization's health. How often are people committing code? How fast are bugs getting fixed? It paints a vivid picture of your entire engineering culture. And then you get the raw, unfiltered truth straight from the source. Just listen to this quote from a data scientist on Glassdoor. An investor reads this and instantly knows that the whole AI-first marketing slogan is, well, a stretch. They see a small, overworked team drowning in bad data. That one comment can completely change the tone of a multi-million-dollar negotiation. And on anonymous forums like Blind, it gets even more direct. This quote here, this is a bombshell. It's not just saying the ethics process is weak. It's saying it's a complete sham, what some call governance theater. Even worse, it reveals a culture of fear. For any stakeholder worried about long-term risk, this is a 5-alarm fire. And make no mistake, stakeholders are weighing these comments carefully. As this chart shows, not all red flags are created equal. Complaining about tech debt or project pressure? That's a warning sign for sure. But when employees start talking about ignoring bias or blowing off regulations, those are critical, deal-killing red flags. They point to systemic, fundamental risks. So let's see what happens when all these little signals add up. We're going to look at a case study that puts a real dollar amount on the cost of saying one thing and doing another.
The story is probably a familiar one. An AI company claims it's cutting edge and has robust governance. A potential investor starts their due diligence. Over just 3 weeks, they use OSINT. What do they find? A ghost town on GitHub, employee reviews talking about a struggling project, and a steady stream of top engineers heading for the exits. The decision becomes obvious: investment declined.
And the financial impact in this real-world example? A 40%. That's 40 downward adjustment to their valuation. Just let that sink in. That is the cold, hard price of a credibility gap in today's world. So here's the main takeaway from all this. Transparency isn't something you opt into anymore. It's just the default state of business. The question is no longer if they'll discover the truth. The only question left is whether that truth is going to back up your story or blow it to pieces. Which brings us to one final, really important question for you to take back to your own leadership team. When those stakeholders inevitably peer inside your organization, what are they going to find? Is your reality your greatest asset, or is it your biggest liability?